Okay, I'm not gonna overthink it because I was overthinking it, and the irony is that this is a fear of being seen, fears of like creating video. Hi, my name is Pavni, welcome to my YouTube channel, and today we are talking about artists or just anybody that aspires to do something and why we're afraid to do those things, and some of the common reasons that first hold us back, then what happens when you slowly start to get over those fears and you start creating, and will we ever get to a place of getting over this so-called fear of being seen? And I thought my story and how I've become the creative that I am now, very early stage still, but I would say exponentially better with this whole fear of being seen business, is a good way to talk through these things. I asked on my Instagram story about you guys and your fear of being seen and why you don't share your work, and I think I got like 20 or 30 responses. It was one of the most like responded to stories that I've put out, and it was so interesting to see. One of the first things that I get is plagiarism. Yeah, we're gonna start there. So what if I put my work out there? I'm a tiny account, no account, 0 followers maybe, but some artist stumbles across it, takes it, copies it across, and now my work's been stolen. What do I do? Well, I'm gonna speak from the internet age because that is all I can speak for. Plagiarism is a very, very, very serious issue, and now I would say there are avenues and platforms for very small creators. If there is like an exact lyric by lyric copy or line by line copy, etc., to argue this and to take it like a legal route if you want to. And yes, there's an element of you could get squashed because you're a tiny person, but I think people will support you, and at least you kind of get recognition, which is super duper nice. So to some extent there is that. But what if the copying is not word for word? Like, what if you can't like go on like Instagram reels and be like, I wrote this on this date? By the way, email yourself, practical tips, email yourself your stuff or store it in notes, screenshot like timestamps of when you're writing things if you really care about this. By the way, it's a way to protect yourself. Anyways, let's go back to the chatty part. So you can't go on reels and be like, this is my work, this is this person's work, I wrote it this time, they wrote it this time, look. And they've both existed in the public domain, so this person could somehow have stumbled across this piece of work. You can present this, your reel will probably blow up. At least, even if you can't get legal justice, people will know and people will care and people will support. That part of the internet's super chill. Now, you have a piece of work. There is this thing called zeitgeist, which means that the cultural conversation is very similar right now. And so someone who has, let's say, 1 million followers is in the same mood, the same vibe, and it's very topical to write about something, and they write about that, and you've written yours like a few months before or something. You were ahead of the curve, you were thinking about this, or you've read this or whatever it is before, and it's similar but not the same. And now it may be the case that they copied you, could be because of like zeitgeist. What do you do? And I wish somebody had really sat me down and talked to me about this, because an example I want to give you where I had this fear is not creatively with writing, but a business. So when I was about 19 years old at university, I started researching how to connect a bunch of resources we had to develop a business for good. So it's like called a social enterprise. And I wanted to go back to India because my parents have for the longest time talked about how they want to help kids in India, you know, the schools they come from, women in particular. My mum was very passionate about providing more resources and opportunity for women just because of how many resources we have just living here. Even though we don't come from like a very well-off family, you know, there are things that have helped me, like free education, access to funding, trips and all this to get to where I am today and keep growing. Anyways, had this ambition and I started researching how to set up a business. I partnered with an NGO. We started researching a social enterprise. It was called Bloom Bodha, and the idea was to specifically help young girls in a part-time model job to make money, but also be creatives and designers and all of this, partner with UK university students and develop a brand that people will go back to, not because they're thinking it's an NGO or a social enterprise, but because they genuinely like the product, and these girls learn what it genuinely means to build and eventually take co-ownership of a business. Sounds fantastic. At the time, this was like 4 or 5 years ago, some elements of it were very unique, and we started like doing the branding and all of this at uni with a bunch of friends and started sharing it out. And I remember as we were developing it, as I was winning some funding to support this, going to India, meeting young women, developing products, I started getting very like, it's cool that people are supporting me, friends and stuff, and we're sharing it on social media. But what if someone steals this idea? What if someone like replicates it, like I said, in a way that I can't be like, oh, this is mine? And it did happen. There was a girl, I remember she messaged me. She lived in like Southeast Asia somewhere, and she was like, this is so cool, amazing. And I was like, oh wow, support her, amazing. A few weeks later, she sets up a page. Look at the page, exact same business model, but implemented in the part of the world she's in. And at that time, I remember going to a mentor and being like, oh, I think she like took the idea. And I felt so protective. I also felt really like uneven, very emotional, more than I should have been. But I didn't have someone to talk to me like this, because even the mentor I went to kind of just looked at me and went, tough, these things happen, like this is how it is, this is how people take ideas, and this is how the world works, kind of thing. And I wish what she told me is ideas can always be taken and stolen and replicated, and actually it's about you and the mindset you have towards those. So something I wish she told me was trust in yourself, that one, if your idea is to, if your intention is to genuinely help people in the context of this business, you should feel good that someone took this and ran with it, and there are going to be young women, men, people in that part of the world now benefiting in a sustainable social enterprise model that you can say you were working on and feel cool about. Like, you kind of have, be, if your altruism is genuine, then your happiness, and you should have approached it as more of like a sportive attitude. And if it blows up, it blows up, because what you have to remember is, if you can come up with one good idea, trust yourself to come up with 10 more. Trust yourself that maybe the idea can be replicated, but your thought process, your approach, your empathy, your kindness, whatever it is, all these like very unique mixture of qualities that make you, that cannot be replicated. And that is the point you have to get to. And yes, that was a business example, but apply the same thing to your art. If there is lines being taken from a certain piece of work or a poem or whatever it is that's been shared, and you cannot dispute it because of the nature of the limits of language, inspiration, all of this stuff, trust that you can come up with 10 more pieces that will blow that out of your water. Do not treat every single piece of work so preciously. Just not, again, it's not about not respecting your work. Of course, respect your work, but don't let that paralyze you or stop you from creating 10 absolute gems going ahead. And remember that you are young. Or, to be honest, that is a strange concept. Like, you don't have to be young. You just have, most of us have time on our sides, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. Like, in years to come and days to come and months to come, sharing your work, getting feedback on it, all of these things outweigh the risk of your work being stolen. Does that make sense? And how much it benefits you as a creative, and what you learn, even if your work, like, touch wood, but if your work does get stolen or whatever happens in that process, you learn and grow so much. And I guess self-care talk, which I'm not, or self-help talk that I'm not super fond of, but it is, this part is important. It's about having a growth mindset. Essentially, how you treat the potential of going something bad. Ooh, whoops. Am I out of focus? Hello? It's just getting darker and darker. Anyways, how you treat the potential of something not working out will say a lot about whether this will be the thing that paralyzes you, or this will be the thing that just helps you get stronger and stronger and go forward with passion and trust and genuine like empathy to yourself and to other people, and grow. And I think that is how some of the greatest artists that you love and I love have probably become great artists, right? Imagine thinking, oh, like, this work could get stolen and never doing anything, as opposed to believing, well, if you take one, I'll come back with 100 because I'm the one that made that and you thought that was good enough to be stolen. So easier said than done, I know, but hopefully a bit of a nicer pep talk and words that I wish I had, this whole idea of things being taken. And the other part of sharing work is vulnerability. A lot of people have messaged me in the tens, not in the hundreds, about, you know, it's like sometimes with writing specifically, but could be any creative pursuit, your baby. And also sometimes it's your journal, right? It's like putting out your journal saying, this is how something has wrecked me before, or something destroys me, or whatever it is, or something elevates me with happiness. And again, it comes with inner work. There are two parts of this that apply to other parts of sharing work. One is inner work. So when you get to a place that you're okay with sharing your work, you've got to understand that not everybody's opinion of it weighs the same, and you have to become somebody that doesn't think of it like that. Like, just because, say, you share a poem and it was about a very devastating time in your life, you've got to understand that once it's in the public domain, anybody can judge it in any way, but their judgment is meaningless unless you give value to it. Make sense? And again, nobody is like indestructible. Of course it's going to hurt. And this brings me to my second point, which is the practice of sharing your work, the practice of feedback. That helps a lot with kind of growing thicker skin to judgment and to this concept of vulnerability. And you can practice vulnerability not just with sharing work, if you would like, by the way. Again, all of this, no pressure. Everybody comes to this at their own time, has their own journey. Some people are not interested in this, absolutely fine. But if you want to become more vulnerable and be okay and be less fragile with how anybody outside of you reacts to your vulnerability, you can start practicing that in other parts of your life. And I'm not going to go into it because I don't feel qualified. I'm not like a guru in this stuff, but there is plenty of resources, free, paid, any budget, any range. If you're watching this, me on YouTube, you will probably have access to it. So yeah, I say do the inner work for vulnerability and sharing things. And ultimately, as with every point I've mentioned so far, it's about weighing the pros and cons of how you feel, like about what one piece of work that could absolutely strike gold would mean to you as a creative, an artist, a business person, whatever it is, and whether you can bear all of the losses or the setbacks, or just having nobody see your work until then. Which brings me to the third point that was commonly addressed of, well, you can split it into two parts. Absolutely nobody seeing your work. What then? Well, again, feedback and the even absolutely no one seeing your work on social media is feedback, right? It means either you need to grab some help to get social media and how to play that game, but remember that the platforms need artists more than they make it out to, because without you, the feeds would be empty. They need creators of any capacity, of any kind. So you do hold power. Also, it's not be all and end all on social media. You know, you absolutely are just as much of an artist if you go and perform at your local coffee shop. You are just as much of an artist if you perform for your mum and dad, your sister, anybody that's at home, to your pet cat. It still helps you practice. You can practice your cadence if you're, again, I'm speaking for poetry and writing, but so many other things. So remember that, like, in terms of sharing work to improve craft, there is so much more to it than social media. That's a really key point. If you are posting on social media, it's not getting feedback or response or being seen, that is the algorithm and like social media game, which takes patience, it takes consistency. Again, my story, started putting stuff on social media since about 6 years ago, started sharing writing on social media about 2 years ago, and only as of 6 weeks ago do I have an audience. And I'd consider myself quite lucky, because you hear of creators that do it for like 8 years and 10 years and see nothing and no returns, or nobody seeing their work, etc. So yeah, you've got to understand. And again, for some creatives it's exhausting. Social media isn't their game, and just because social media isn't recognizing you, it doesn't mean you're not good at what you do, by the way. And that kind of swiftly brings me into, okay, I guess to summarize this whole what if no one sees my work, you've got to have faith and patience that they do. And if they really don't, then you've got to ask yourself, what are you doing? Evaluate, ask for help, and know when, where, like the practicality of it, because I feel like to be a creative, you've got to be a little bit irrational, but you also have to have a crazy amount of like self-faith, you know. I was listening to sorry, I don't know if I breathed weird. I was listening to Tracy Chapman's Fast Car, and there's this lyric, she's like, I've got a feeling I'm gonna make it. I'm paraphrasing, but it's beautiful. It's this idea of this like self-faith, and you hear lots of creatives talk about this, that somewhere inside of them, in their chest, in their hearts, they're like, I need to keep going because I never know when I'm close, and I've got a feeling that I can make it. And if you do honor that and pursue it, and don't look at time, and don't compare yourself with other people. Everybody is going through their own stuff, by the way. Like, if you see someone when the door opens, they are getting there after like 50 doors closing on them that you haven't seen, you know. A little bit generic advice, but very, very, very true and important. So please keep that in mind. And yeah, if you're expecting fast results, if you're expecting to post one post or 3 posts for like 6 months, and then boom, you're exploding and you're the hottest thing to ever exist, reevaluate. Do you just want to make work to be seen? Because I'm not gonna lie, on social media, yes, that's unlikely, but you can also engineer things and write things so that people will like them. I see it happen all the time. I see accounts with millions of views that I personally do not like the work. And again, you don't know what will and will not click sometimes, and sometimes there is a portion of online audiences that just want fast, quick consumption, and there is this argument about so-called insta poetry, right? So ask yourself, do you want to do that? Because right now there's a pretty hot market for it in some parts of the world, and Instagram loves it. And yeah, are you okay with that? Again, don't feel guilty about this stuff. It is your game, your life. And if you have clarity on why you're doing what you're doing and you're happy to do it, go ahead and do it. But again, don't feel frustrated. I never look at those accounts and go, oh, they write blah, like, why do they get such views and I don't, and all this. I used to years ago, but now I'm like, cool, like there's an audience for it. That creator likes that audience. I want an audience that will comb through my words and find meanings, but I'm also okay accepting that sometimes even I just want to read a couple lines and go, whoa, profound, or like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel, and that's that. So yeah, you can't really just like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, like see people as like monoliths. I guess you can't like think just one thing. Everybody has different moods, and that's the magic of content, that there are so many people. Sometimes we forget, by the way, 8 billion plus people and some 2 billion plus that have social media. So you will eventually find your people, and you can play the game. One story before I move on is about Love Story by Eric Segal. I don't know, Segal, American writer, wrote Love Story in 1970, and there's a story that I read in passing that goes something like how he wanted to write other things, stuff was not selling, and I think an agent or someone was like, oh, you don't know how to write for the masses, and this man was like, I know how to write for the masses, like I know what sells, I just want people to read my work, but I can show you. And he kind of, out of spite, essentially wrote Love Story, and Love Story has gone on to become one of the most well-known stories of all time. The sort of core tropes are used over and over and over again in like every movie ever. If you go Google Love Story, you'll know what I mean. There's been like 4 remakes of it in India. There's a Telugu movie called Mujhse Dosti Karogi, and not Telugu, I said Telugu and then spoke in Hindi. In Hindi, Mujhse Dosti Karogi, which means Will You Be My Friend? Hrithik Roshan, Rani Mukherjee and Kareena Kapoor. And that book is mentioned in that film as well. And yeah, just fascinating stuff. A case of where sometimes a mass audience wants a certain type of thing, and yeah, Love Story went on to be like the bestseller, I believe, in America that year, and has sold like 1 million copies or something. So yeah, ask yourself, what kind of artist do you want to be, and do you want to play the game? Even that could help you get over this fear of being seen, by the way, because once you have a lot of eyes on your work, you start figuring out, okay, this is how audiences react, and once you build up like a fan base, you can start making work you really want to make, and maybe your audience will be loyal enough to you to then read that, and you can maybe have it both ways. Don't know what happened to Eric Segal. I don't know if his other books did well. I do know Love Story became his legacy. I do own the book. It's one of the first books I bought, I think, in my early teens. Anyways, I'm gonna wrap this up because it's going on to be such a long video, but I hope this was like somewhat helpful. One more thing, the other side of nobody seeing your work is, what if your work is heavily negatively criticized, trolled, etc., and or somebody that you look up to doesn't like your work? What if you're bad? What if you suck? And the thing I put forward to you, again, if you want to share your work, is being bad at something. If you really, really, really want to learn it, most art is a craft, by the way, and maybe you will never be as good as somebody who has a natural talent, but if you don't try, you'll never know. And just because one person doesn't like your work, it does not mean it would not resonate with a million people. It literally doesn't. It's just a game of statistics and probability and a pep talk you need to have with yourself. Like, if somebody you really look up to looks at your piece of writing and goes, this is rubbish, it literally does not mean you should stop writing, and it does not mean you suck. It could literally mean that it's not that person's cup of tea, but 10,000 people could look at it and go, this is the best thing I've read since forever. And just a game of probability and taste and subjectivity, all of things that get lost because, again, you're probably comparing yourself. You're probably looking at someone who has like 100,000, a million followers and being like, oh, that will never be me. Because I don't know, oh wow, I was about to get sassy, sorry. You're never even gonna figure out if you could get to the 100,000 if you let one comment or one person you really admire telling you suck stop. And I know some people will say you've got to know when you're not good at something, or you've got to know that this is not going to be something that's going to work for you. But to that I say, not at the beginning. Give yourself a chance. Try, share your work, put it out there if you want to, and you learn. And just to sum up this entire thing of being seen, and what I would tell a younger me, to people watching out there, anybody that needs to hear it, is if you never try, you'll never know. The cheesy saying of like, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take completely applies to taking a risk and putting your creative endeavors. And something unique that I think I could offer as like advice or things to keep in mind is, do not be harsh on yourself for not starting, for being afraid, for not putting yourself out there, because trust in timing, and that just in the context of your very unique life, which has problems and issues and barriers that only you know. It doesn't matter how articulate or how amazing you are. Everyone has stuff going on that we can't ever really show or make somebody else understand. We don't need to. But trust that all of that stuff is there, and that is stopping you, and you being mean to yourself and harsh to yourself and not addressing that stuff is not going to get you anywhere. So start from what can work. Start imperfectly. Like, trust me, that's another thing that I learned, was just sharing work that doesn't look amazing, graphics that don't look good, work that is not good. I have an entire poetry collection filled with some pieces that I am not proud of, but I knew that if I didn't put myself out there, I'd regret it for so long. And guess what? It's years and years of putting it out there that made me a better artist, because each time I evaluated, I looked at it, I got better, I was inspired, I connected with people, good or bad. If my friends were like not very receptive to it, I was like, oh, cool, this doesn't work, they don't like it, but I like it. Why do I like it? And I've had to kind of create like certain boundaries of like accepting that there's going to be work I adore which is going to flop, and there's going to be work that I'm indifferent to that's going to do amazing. It's just the nature of putting yourself out there. So my like parting advice, thanks for listening. So it's very long, hopefully somewhat helpful discussion about the fear of being seen, which is something that I think most of us are stubborn to admit that we have, is to be gentle, trust your timing, do not compare, and if you never try, you never know. So go make a rubbish post, start terribly, start messily and uncreatively, in bad lighting, without the right tech, none of it, and see what happens. And yes, you might take longer than other people. Yes, this is not what the hardballers want you to know. Yes, some people will say create like quality more than quantity, but sometimes when you're learning, quantity is better. And you know, one of my favorite pieces of advice is sometimes to just for yourself, like make copies of your favorite artist's work, because if you can replicate to a perfect level, you learn so much and you can start developing your own style, and inevitably you will, because the combination of things that make you are going to be unique. Maybe individual elements of that combination are not, you know, this whole ones and zeros thing. We're all made of ones and zeros, right? Well, we're not. Technology is. Maybe we are. I don't know that part. Anyways, ones and zeros, but everything is like a unique combination of ones and zeros, right? So please keep that in mind. I just hope, yeah, you please let me know if you have any questions, further discussions and conversations you want on this, anything you think I've missed. Please like, share, subscribe this video if you liked this content, if you want more of it. And I just really just know that there's one girl on the internet rooting for you, and however imperfect your work might be, and know that out of all of that you could probably discover some magic, whether that's about yourself, your work, creativity, and everything you fail is just a building block leading to like your success. Oh, corny, I know. But just, yeah, take that pressure off. Pressure of success, take it off. Just have fun, get creative, play in every area where possible, and be very, 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 I'm gonna go seriously now, but be very kind to yourself, because your unique context, only you know it. And love is the thing that's going to get you to becoming the best artist possible, not being harsh and absolutely breaking yourself, because if you break yourself all the way to the finish line, what is the point of even getting there? Like, will you look back and be like, what have I done all this for? And you miss the magic and the creativity when you do it that way. Okay, bye. Have a lovely day, night, evening. It's been Pavni. Please like, share, subscribe.